Welcome to the Value Builder Podcast, where we focus on real estate with a value-add mindset. Real strategies, real operators, real outcomes. Let's dive in.
Hello, Value Builder community. Today I have Jonathan Hayek, who proves that teaching can build serious wealth through real estate strategies. Jonathan spent 8 years as a special education teacher while seriously building a real estate portfolio during the nights, weekends, and school holidays. He is right now a managing partner of Endurance Properties, focusing on single-tenant, triple-net industrial properties, and we'll dive in deeper in that. And he's hosting right now the Source of Commercial Real Estate podcast with daily episodes. I think it has correlation to endurance problem. I can't wait to dive in. So what I love about Jonathan's story is how he used his stable W-2 income to fund his real estate dreams, and how he lives his ultimate lifestyle in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, which is my favorite state. Jonathan, you've built a massive value transitioning from teaching to commercial real estate. So I would like to start how do you think your teaching background actually become an advantage in building a real estate portfolio?
Saul, thank you so much for having me. Gosh, how was teaching an advantage? I mean, one of the first things that comes to mind is it taught me what I don't want. And by that, I mean, I love teaching and we need great teachers in this world, but financially, teachers just are not going to come out on top. And so I remember this one night with my wife, we were talking about finances, and I just said, I just don't think we're going to make very much money in our lives, because I was teaching and she was working for a non-for-profit and making almost nothing. So then after that, I kind of slept on it and thought, you know what? That's not good enough. I'm not, I was like 31 or 32 years old at the time, and I was just not satisfied with that answer at that point in my life. And so that's when I really just kind of took a bet on myself and got into real estate more. So, I mean, teaching it was a great profession. I retired from teaching in 2019 to pursue real estate full time. But it taught me to just kind of go after what I want in life and bet on myself and not fear failure.
That makes sense. Now, so let's dive in right away in real estate. Yeah, I'm just curious about your real estate model acquisitions. And of course, I'm in the back of my mind comparing to our model, not necessarily which is better or worse, just that there's so many different of them. So is your portfolio or model of real estate acquisitions geared towards more value add, or is that more steady Eddie triple net, very high quality tenants? Now, where do you fall in that range?
The cool thing is you can do both.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have net leased assets that are also value add. So I do have part of my portfolio that is more stable cash flows. Earlier this year, I sold my last residential property, an 8-unit apartment building, and 1031'd that into a sale leaseback property with a 10-year lease with annual escalation. So that property has an absolute net lease. I don't have to do anything. And there's just annual escalations with a quality tenant. And so that's just kind of a cash flow play, a place to put that capital and have nice growth over the next decade. And then I have other properties where I'd say the majority of my portfolio is more value add. So for these properties, I'm targeting properties that are occupied with good quality tenants that have been there for a long time, but the lease is expiring in the next 1 to 3 years, and rents are below market. And so in the industrial world, that's where the value add comes in, is oftentimes usually tenants just stay, especially if they've been there for decades. And so they don't want to leave. And if you can raise the rent 10, 20, 30% with a new lease, that's a big win.
Makes sense. So when you're buying those leases 1-3 year left, you financing them with local banks, or you have to have some special bridge financing or creative financing, so to speak?
Generally with local banks. And so I'll contact a lender in the market that the property is purchased, and I'll build a relationship with a lender and finance it with a local bank.
And typically, you say it's typically you go to the same lender who is financing already, who financed in the past, right?
I mean, working with small banks is an art in and of
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
And so when I go to a new market, I might have to call 25 different lenders to find out who has an appetite for this kind of asset, if their rate and terms are reasonable. I'll also ask people for referrals, things like that. And so if I can do repeat business with banks, I certainly will. It is definitely easier to go to a repeat lender than it is to start over from scratch. And some of my lenders will do, even though it's a local bank, they will do deals in different states. And so I'll go back to that lender, even if it's in a different state. And so always try to use a repeat lender. But if not, then I start over from scratch and get on the phone and start building new relationships.
Yeah, I think probably the same thing on our end. If it's a new market, for example, I have a deal on a contract today in Akron, Ohio. I don't have anything in Akron. We have in Dayton market, but it's a little further away. And yeah, I'm going to the same lender who has the debt right now. And not probably not going to be so sensitive on the rate, but when it comes in refinancing, then I'll compete on the rate, and maybe I'm going to bring the lender who I have the most relationship. So yeah. Very, very typical, very similar way the way we do it as well. All right, so let's go. If you may, you went from flipping houses to multifamily to triple net industrial. So I see many folks in our industry that are not able to make that jump from housing to multifamily to industrial or commercial or development. Do you mind sharing your story? How did it happen, and what made you propel this way?
Yeah, so as I was towards the tail end of my teaching career, I started flipping houses on nights and weekends and school holidays, and I would use the capital from those flips to buy small multifamily apartment buildings, duplexes, fourplexes. And at one point, I built up to a portfolio of like 20 or 22 doors. And it was also at about this point that I realized how much management work this was going to be. And I started having my first child was born around this point, and I was like, man, I don't think I want to have this empire of small multifamily properties. What are my other options? And so I started investigating commercial properties. And so it was at this time that I bought my first commercial deal, which was an office building. And it was a great experience. I learned a million different lessons on that deal. One of those lessons was that I don't want to own office buildings. And so I thought, well, this was great, but what else is out there? There's retail out there. Okay, maybe retail. But what about industrial? What's industrial about? And so I just kind of went down the path of trying to learn everything I could about industrial, and there wasn't a lot of information out there. I couldn't learn very much. There's not a lot of podcasts, not a lot of people doing any education on this. And so that's when I started my own podcast. And ultimately, I bought my first industrial deal because I just thought, well, I'm going to learn about this by doing it. And so I bought my first single-tenant industrial deal in Oklahoma City and decided to learn on it. And I still own that property. It's been a great property for me. And so then, like I mentioned earlier, recently sold my last residential property. And so now I'm full on in industrial.
You still have that office building, or you sold it?
Sold the office building.
Sold the office building. And let me guess why you sold it. So here's my experience with an industrial building. Tenant management is difficult. It's like, it's a long-term hotel, very similar to housing. But the tenant terms are so different than industrial. After 3 or 5 years, when tenant comes in, you're spending another 20, 30, 40 bucks on TI, and you start over. In industrial, the tenant moves out, we spend $1, $2, $3, and they move in, right? Was it the experience?
Yeah, I mean, my office building, I bought it vacant. And I thought, well, at the time I was really into multifamily. And so I thought, well, what would I do with a vacant multifamily property? I'd fix it up and rent it out. And so that's what I did. So I painted and, made it more attractive to small business owners. And I just leased out little offices to small business owners. And eventually I got the whole thing leased up. And yeah, it is a little more management intensive, not quite like a multifamily property, but more management intensive. And I had added the most amount of value that I could have. I bought it vacant and leased it up to 100% occupancy, and there's nothing else I could do with it. And so I was like,
Yeah.
well, let's try to sell this thing. And so I did sell it. I held it for about 18 months and was able to sell it, make a good profit, and learn a bunch of lessons and move on to the next thing.
That's awesome. That's great. All right. Loving it. So follow-up question also on a philosophy on investing. I think our industry is driven a lot by passive income freedom, so to speak, right? But there are milestones that are different levels of passive income and freedoms, and passive income, as you remember, becomes not a passive when you have 20, 40, 50 doors with many tenants. So question is, where do you fall in philosophy? Are you going after passive cash flow, or you focus building value and selling occasionally to sustain the lifestyle, instead of just chasing the passive income for 20, 30 years and hopefully it's going to come at some point?
Ideally, you have both. So that's
Mhm.
where the value add properties come in. And so at this point in my investing journey, I am trying to build up my cash flow. And so I am a cash flow investor. Deal's got a cash flow on day one. Ideally, I'm also building equity by improving it by either getting a better tenant in there, extending the lease, increasing rents. And then when the time is right, selling that asset when it makes sense. If I get a new 5 or 7 or 10-year lease, maybe it makes sense to sell that asset and 1031 into something bigger or something that's cash flowing more, and continuing to build and build and build. Now, if you talk to me in 20 years or 30 years, I might say something different. I might be even more passive, or maybe even more into equities at that point. But right now, I am focused on both building cash flow and building my net worth.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I'm falling in a similar boat. I was guilty, I think, quite a few years ago, when I was just so stubborn, just to build cash flow and not selling anything ever. And eventually, when COVID hit, sold everything what I have in houses, and you turn that spreadsheet into cash, and then turn them into the industrial buildings. And actually, it was a really good move. And some of them actually I spend on a lifestyle, and there's nothing wrong, sell sometimes, and as long as you convert to something better, right? So
Yeah, and I mean, selling isn't bad. Like, just because that may be a myth, that just because you hold on to something, you believe that you have more cash flow. You
yeah,
could sell something and you could upgrade, and you could sell
exactly,
$1 million property and then get a $2 million property with
exactly.
twice the cash flow.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's me. That's exactly when I, get it from where we're at, because our industry a lot of times has been getting, many people are getting deceived by that. All right. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast. You're a host of the Source of Commercial Real Estate with daily episodes. How has building this platform created value for your business and for the community? What impact was that podcast for you?
Yeah, I am not quite to daily episodes. I'm doing weekly, sometimes 2 times a week, but for the most part, weekly episodes. And we're just about 200 episodes in. And for me, the value of the podcast has been all about networking. So meeting people like yourself that I would have never otherwise had the chance to talk with. There's tremendous value in that. Lots of people, lots of early investors, they want to learn, they want a mentor, they want to talk with people with more experience with them. And so, you reach out to them on social media or something. You're like, hey, can I pick your brain? And a lot of experienced investors are like, no, you may not pick my brain. No, I'm not going out to coffee with you, because to them, there's no value in that for them. But if instead, you have a podcast and you invite them on and you give them a platform to talk about their business, talk about themselves, potentially bring in more passive investors, there's value in that for them. And so for you as a host, you get a lot of value because you can ask them whatever questions you want. But then there's also value for the guest because they get to promote their business and talk about real estate. And so I've found that almost everyone, like 99% of the people that I reach out to are more than happy to come on and have a conversation about their business and share their wisdom about commercial real estate. And so for me, it's been huge for networking and talking to people that I would never otherwise have a chance to talk to.
Yeah, yeah. I'm surprised. It's my 14 or 15 episode only. And I was surprised how people actually willing to jump on a call and talk to me. And, half of them were never met before. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then you're definitely, comparing the models and giving some tips if we can and getting some other tips from them. Yeah, that's really great. Awesome. All right. So couple more questions about specific about real estate. Looking in today's market conditions, from your perspective, where do you see the biggest value opportunities? Whether that's asset class, or that's a region, or it's a market, and if you may, what do you see is the biggest opportunity right now?
Cool thing about real estate is that you can make money doing almost anything. So, like, you can buy multifamily in Memphis and probably make money on it if you buy well enough. You could buy industrial in Orange County or in the Inland Empire where it's been overbuilt and probably do fine if you get lucky and you buy well enough. And so I'm a solo operator. And so I design my business around the lifestyle that I want, not to build the biggest business that I possibly can. And so I love single-tenant industrial properties because for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think there's always going to be a need for them. And so think about the tenants, the blue-collar working-class tenants that occupy these very unsexy properties. So these are like glass manufacturers, they're commercial landscapers, they're environmental cleanup companies, cabinet makers, granite fabricators, plumbers, HVAC, all of these blue-collar professions, they're Amazon proof. Amazon is not going to, as far as I know, they're not going to start fabricating granite countertops. They're not going to come to your house and unclog the toilet. We're going to need these blue collar workers forever, as far as I'm concerned, at least as long as I'm alive. And so these businesses will always need a place to do business. They need a warehouse to store their stuff, store their trucks, do their business out of, and they need a small office where their bookkeeper can work from and their receptionist can answer phone calls out of. And so these types of properties are not being built small. These are generally under 20,000 square feet. And so there's some existing supply of it, but new supply is not being built. But there is arguably a growing demand for this type of asset class. And so I am happy to continue to invest in this very unsexy asset class as demand continues to rise and rents continue to rise and new supply anyway, is virtually non-existent. And so that's why I love single-tenant, small industrial properties.
Very interesting. I buy very similar rental, blue collar, industrial tenants, but we typically like to buy them in a multi-tenant facility, which is 30, 40, 50, 60, 100,000 square feet. But our ideal bays are 3,000 square feet, 3 to 5,000 square feet. I don't have any single tenant. Actually, no, I do have one school bus terminal, single tenant in a school bus operator in Naperville. That's where you're from, on the Fort tab. Exactly. Yeah, we have a school bus terminal in Naperville, and so that was. So I'm just curious, why are you focusing on a single tenant, not a multi-tenant? In my mind, I'm hedging the risk. But when I'm thinking of a bus terminal, so sticky. They can't move. They just extend another 5 years. They can't move from there. There's only one school bus terminal in Naperville.
For me, it's about management. So all of my properties are out of state, out of market, and I don't want to have a 5 or 10 tenant building that I have to manage, or I have to manage the manager from across the country. I just don't want that headache. And like you alluded to, a lot of people think, well, single tenant, what if they leave? The truth is, they hardly ever leave. Like, you've got this great tenant, the school bus terminal, and you're like, where are they going to go? There's nowhere else for them to go. They're going to be here for forever. As long as we need school buses in Naperville, Illinois, they're going to be my tenant. And so, that's the cool thing about this asset class is there's such little supply. Even if our tenants wanted to go somewhere else, they might be able to get something in a new construction outside of town, but they're going to pay double or triple the rent, which my tenants are super cheap and they don't want to pay double or triple the rent, and they're going to get a way worse location. And so, in my limited experience, when tenants weigh the option of paying another 5% increase with me and not having to move, staying in this location, keeping their employees happy, or having to take on the monumental task of moving and doubling their rent, there's no question they're going to stay and just pay 5% and keep the status quo and continue to occupy the same building.
Yeah, so true. Now, when you were talking, I was thinking about the school bus terminal and other small industrial properties. Exactly, for the school bus terminal, we have a absolute triple net lease, and we bought it in 2020, March 6th and March 20th. Naperville schools were shut down,
Man.
but we didn't skip the payment. And at the same time, in terms of management, we did not have probably once a maintenance call. I mean, there was nothing. 5 years. Right?
I mean, that property, you don't have to think about it all. It's zero brain power. They're getting their funding from the state.
Yeah.
And so, their funding isn't going anywhere, even in COVID times. And so I'm sure it's an awesome property, awesome tenant. Never sell it.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah. But yeah, you got me thinking, maybe open. Yeah, I should probably look for more even single tenant. Another thing I want to add to what you mentioned is seems like we bought our industrial property at the same time. The first one I bought 2017. I bought it vacant, and believe it or not, you probably know the area. It's a university park. We bought it for $9 a foot from the bank. Right now, we're leasing that at $9 a foot. But why it was so inexpensive at the time? Because industrial was at the time like offices right now. It was a notion in 2017 that everything is going to be produced in Mexico, India, China, and manufacturing is not coming back. And right now, it doesn't matter who's going to be in the administration. There's no globalization talks. So it's deglobalization. So everything is coming back. So that's also why I'm bullish on that asset class.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different uses for industrial real estate. So manufacturing is one use of industrial real estate. There's also distribution, and there's flex space. So most of my properties are blue collar workers that just can't be outsourced. Like if you want to get new windows in your house, you have to have some local window company do that. And so while those maybe elements of those windows might be manufactured overseas, the company that's doing the work has a local office. And just like your school bus terminal, like tell me how that school bus terminal is going to get outsourced to China or Mexico. It's just not going to happen as long as we have school buses delivering kids to schools. The school bus needs a place to park overnight, and that's where our industrial real estate comes in.
That's awesome. Hey, Jonathan, that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope we can do it again. I hope we can do maybe a show on your podcast as well. So I would like to leave with a question to you, or if you want to tell the readers where they can find you. So if you would like to leave readers with one thing about value add industrial from this conversation today, what would that be?
Invest with a long-term focus. Don't make decisions today based on potential future interest rate relief. When you buy real estate, act like you're going to own it for 10 years. Even if you don't, you might get lucky. You might get interest rate relief. You might get cap rate relief, but go into a deal acting like you're going to own it for 10 years and make your decision that way.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Value Builder podcast. For more strategies, stories, and episodes, head to valuebuilder.co or subscribe on your favorite app. Always make it better than you found it and keep adding value. See you in the next one.